is Williams ultimately facing a new rivalry in the grid. Alex has cemented himself as the #1 driver, but just 3 races in, Colapinto's giving a little bit of a run for his money. So people started to ask the question, is Alex that good? It's only been 3 races, and Franco, he's about 1,000 or 100 next to Alex in terms of qualifying. And in Singapore, he threw in a wonderful move on the inside, passing Alex in the first turn. And the best part is that the races have been progressively difficult. Monza, a good place to come in. Baku, tight corners, tight sections. And Singapore, definitely rewarding risk. Alex has a contract till 2026, and Sainz coming in 2025 will be a real test to see whether Alex has the right caliber to remain in F1. Ultimately, where does this leave Williams, Albon and Franco? Let's dive in. Welcome to the channel, you beautiful people. My name's Lucky. You guys know why you're here. We're here to chat about Alex and Franco. He started his F1 journey in 2012, starting as a Red Bull Junior driver. He did not have a lot of success in the single-seater careers early days, and their Red Bull relationship ruptured ultimately. In 2017, things changed around. He had 4 victories in F2 and finished just behind Lando and George, which then reignited the relationship with Red Bull. And in 2019, he got the opportunity to join the Red Bull Junior team when ultimately Daniel made the decision to move to Renault, and Pierre got promoted from AlphaTauri, the Red Bull Junior team, to the Red Bull top team. However, midway through 2019, Pierre underperformed next to Max, and Alex, just half a season in F1, got the opportunity to get promoted to the Red Bull top team. During 2019 and 2020, he raced next to Max in the Red Bull top team, however, fell short and was ousted from the team. In 2021, he spent his times in the sideline as a Red Bull reserve driver, and back in 2022, he returned to Williams as the top driver. And ever since that, it's been Williams and Williams and Williams, and now expected to spend over 5 years with Williams, with a contract extending into 2026. And especially at Williams, since 2020, he definitely outqualified all of his competition. Yes, they were not of the most top caliber in terms of Latifi and Logan. However, he's outshone, he's driven some really wonderful races, and he's embraced almost the team leader role over the course of the last 2 years. And James Vowles seems to be confident to put his faith and potentially the future development of Williams alongside Alex, committing to him for a 2026 plus deal until we can see how they fare next to each other when Sainz comes into the second Williams seat. So now that we've spoken about Alex, it's only really fair to know about the new guy on the block, right? If you want to know why Williams chose Colapinto, I've also done another video about it. But let's now talk about Franco. Franco joined Williams Racing Academy early 2023, and he made his first FP1 practice session in Silverstone. And I think ever since that, James had a potential eye out for this kid, because I think they did see that the pace was there, and then the rest was about finessing. When you have the raw pace, the rest is pretty much kind of getting the experience and getting things into that right window so that you can continue to grow as a race winner. Given that he's also a race winner in F2 already, and he's competed 2 seasons in F2, he's had a fair bit of experience in Formula 2 as well. Ultimately, that meant that it was the right opportunity to promote within and then give the opportunity to a rookie when Logan Sargeant was ultimately asked to step away. Colapinto's not had the most glamorous of careers coming into Formula 1. He wasn't necessarily shouted upon or taunted on like a Kimi Antonelli or a Lando or a George Russell or a Lewis or a Max, right? But coming into Formula One and then 3 races in, he's performed extremely well. And looking at his kind of driving style, seems like he is relatively aggressive. That was evident in terms of how his move in Singapore transpired. Yes, there were comments from Alex saying that, oh, that was a dive bomb, but I think he judged it to perfection, right? Because I think those are moments that make or break a race. So I think he has a relatively aggressive driving style. He also seems to be relatively quick, and he builds up to his quick laps very, very effectively. And despite crashes, doesn't seem to really faze him, which also shows that he is mentally pretty resilient. So I think all in all, a good competitor and a well-welcomed rookie who potentially has what it takes to succeed in Formula One and become a potential true contender for any upcoming F1 seats. So ultimately, how does Franco and Alex compare? We can't compare them so much in Formula One, so let's compare them to their respective teammates. Alex has definitely had the best-in-class competition in the name of Max. Then Daniel Kvyat, yes, he had raw pace and he was a good racer, but the last 2 teammates haven't been top of the cream, let's say, in the name of Latifi and Logan Sargent. He has had a broad spectrum of competition, and he's only really proved himself against Daniel Kvyat to a certain degree, and then of course Logan and Latifi, but he was clearly outperformed by Max. But at that stage you have to kind of question, Alex was probably not the finished article, whereas Max at that point in time had fair few seasons under his belt. You're almost putting this completely new rookie just half a season into F1 next to a really competitive individual in the name of Max with a car that is extremely pointy, right? So one of the high performance podcasts, Alex did mention he loves a pointy front end, but what Max loves is eye-wateringly pointy, right? So the driving styles also matter, and the car was that was relatively built for Max doesn't necessarily allow you to compare apples to apples. On the other side, Franco seems to also have decent competition, right? Antonelli is an example. He's been touted as one of the best up-and-coming superstars, the next Lewis, or the next Max, so to speak. And then you also have Bortoletto, Hajar, and Ollie, another individual who's secured his F1 seat at Haas already. So Colapinto's definitely got good caliber competition in F2 as well. But ultimately, it's very difficult to make an apples to apples comparison. But we only have the statistics for the last 3 races where we could compare Alex and Colapinto. But if we look at how tough the races have been and how well Franco's performed, if last 3 races are the yardstick that we need to measure how good Franco is, if he's doing this well, his ceiling is definitely going to be higher. And I think by the end of the season, he will consistently be able to either be performing at the level of Alex, or maybe even on certain qualifying sessions, even out-qualify Alex. Number 2, styles. I think Alex is a pretty clean driver, and I don't necessarily think he is extremely aggressive. He does manage races pretty well. So for example, last year Canada, he maintained 7th, Silverstone 8th, and there were moments where James Vowles also commented on the radio post-race, which meant that was a champion's drive. So I think in terms of racecraft, Alex is definitely good. Colapinto has a lot to learn and gain in terms of experience. But I think in terms of style, Franco's got a little bit more of an aggressive and a killer within versus Alex. So in terms of driving styles, I think Franco is a bit more aggressive, whereas Alex is a bit more conservative and risk averse, or a very much clean driver who doesn't necessarily over risk his machinery. Next, in terms of consistency, it's a bit unseen, right? So you can't necessarily compare F2 seasons for consistency, because I think F1 is a completely different beast. So Alex has been consistent throughout his last 2 seasons at Williams. He's consistently outperformed his teammates. He's grabbed the most the car could offer where the opportunity arises. Yes, he's had some some issues, for example, Australia last year, some misjudgments, let's say, but more or less about 95% of the time he's taken the most out of the car. Whereas on Colapinto's side, we've really only seen 3 circuits. Yes, they've grown consistently in terms of complexity, but we haven't seen him in a Austin or a Suzuka or a Silverstone or an Interlagos. So over the course of the second half of post this autumn break, we'll probably start to see more and more of how well Colapinto does across a variation of circuits as well, so that we can assess how consistent he is over the course of a season, because I think that's what ultimately makes or breaks a champion, really, right? So you see that with Lando, for example. If you were to perform at your optimal race car, racer and team since Imola, I think Lando would more or less be equivalent with Max in terms of points tally. Right? But he is still 52 points away despite having the fastest car. And that's why I think the feats that Max does or Lewis did over their dominant eras are unfathomable and very, very commendable, because it's not easy, because consistency is a very, very challenging part. And then last but not least, in terms of fandom, following and sponsorship, in terms of comparison there, I feel like Franco's got a real aura around him, and I think the Argentinian ESPN sports crew added a few more people as soon as they got to know that he's going to be on. He brought in a fair few millions in terms of Argentinian sponsorship. He also has wonderful responses at post races, right? He has this character that is likable. He almost reminds me a little bit of Oscar and a little bit of Ricardo, right? Which I think is a wonderful combination, because it ends up depicting that you're calm, but yet you have this child within you, which is this lovable side in you. So I'm a big fan ultimately, right? The last piece of comparison ultimately is contracts, right? So Alex has a contract going into 2026. Sainz also has a contract going into 2026. I think, but both of these drivers potentially have performance clauses, and especially with Sainz, I think he also has a potential to exit Williams if there was a top team that opens up. Maybe that's Red Bull, or maybe that's Mercedes. I don't know. Future will tell us. But I think each of those drivers will have a performance clause, and Franco obviously is only contracted for this year with Williams, right? Although despite James Vowles saying that he's going to work with Sauber to try and get him the Sauber seat. I did make a separate video about where and who deserves to be in that Sauber seat. I'll link it up here. So that's where the contracts land. So Alex 2026, Sainz 2026, Franco 2024. But a lot of things can change, and we've seen in this industry that contracts mean. So ultimately the question becomes, what if Alex underperforms against Franco? Like, what do you guys think? Do you think that James Vowles needs to make a decision and then put Franco in for 2025, or hold Franco as a reserve driver? Or alternatively, the other way is that something happens over the course of 2025, Sainz gets a top team. That's the other way that Franco might end up in Williams for 2026. But my biggest question ultimately is, what if Sainz and Alex is going to be a 50-50 split or a 40-60 split? There are moments where Alex outperforms Sainz, Sainz outperforms Alex, and neither of them finds a different seat in an alternative team. Where does that leave Franco? So at that point, you start to question experience and youth. Would that be a good balance, or would it be experience and experience? Would that be a good balance going into 2026? Either way, I feel like the consistency from 2025 to 2026 is pretty important, and getting the right mix there is pretty critical for a team to have a good development trajectory. That said, if you were to ask me, I would go with an experience and youth combo. Pair up Franco with whoever is better over the course of the next season between Alex and Sainz. What do you guys think? That's it for this video. See you guys on the next one. Peace. Ciao.